This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, the podcast designed to help you step out of the shadows and become an inspirational leader. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and each episode I will be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. I'll be picking their brains for those golden nuggets that will help you be the best you can be. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing at thereluctantleader.co.uk, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's get on with the show. Today I'm talking to James Sale. James is the creator of Motivational Maps and the founder of Motivational Maps Limited. He's a speaker, writer and thought leader in the worldwide movement to transform how management works by enabling the ego-centered, fear-based 20th century top-down control model to be superseded by a 20th century dynamic bottom-up engagement-focused approach. His 3 books, Mapping Motivation for Coaching, and Mapping Motivation for Engagement, published by Routledge, are the definitive text on how to do this by specifically addressing the question of employee motivation and its correlation with performance, productivity, and profitability. James has nearly 500 management consultants and business coaches in 14 countries that are licensed to use his product with corporates, small and medium-sized businesses, and public sector organisations. I hope you enjoy this chat we had about motivation, and I will catch you all on the other side. So welcome, James, to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. We've known each other for 20 years now. We've worked together. So actually, it's like coming home, really, talking to you. It's great news.
It has been a long time. We can obviously talk about our first meeting and what that was all about as we go along. But before we get into that, I think we should find out a bit about you and specifically why you do what you do and what was the pivotal moment that started you along the path.
Well, as I said to you some time ago, Mark, it's really, these things are so convoluted and you don't want to bore people to death. But in essence, why I do what I do is I'm following my destiny. So what that means is I'm actually following the unveiling of the purpose of my life through the power of the divine. And the opposite of that is to be a victim of fate. So when you're a victim of fate, you have to do something. You feel trapped, and usually you have trapped yourself. So for example, my mother, who died last year, aged 91, 1 month before she died, she said to me, I didn't think it would end like this. It actually had ended really badly for my mother, despite all that everyone tried to do to help her, because she was trapped in her own thinking that was negative and that was not helpful to her and which disappointed. So I'm actually working through the purpose of my life. And actually this purpose, it was not clear to me when I started. It was unimaginable. And looking back at it now, it's greater than anything I could ever have conceived of at the outset. And it's a process of discovery, which means, of course, that I have consistently in my life made some terrible mistakes, but I haven't persevered with them. Having made the mistake, there is a lesson to be learned from this, and I have readjusted and got back on track. And then when you get back on track, you hear this kind of inner voice, which is also an outer voice telling you that is where you're going. So I am actually fulfilling my destiny, and that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And this destiny has led me to have various jobs, to find myself completely unemployable because I don't like working for other people, to become self-employed, a very important distinction, for 10 or 11 years, and to run a business, self-employed business, and then to realize that a self-employed business isn't really a business at all, that in fact a real business is the kind of business that makes money while you're sleeping and not just necessarily while you're trading your time for money. So it was the sense of aging, the sense of, what was I going to do? I couldn't go on forever training people and coaching people. that partly led me to develop this idea of the motivational map in 2006 and before, in fact, but it went online in 2006 so that I could create something that would influence people in a profound way, that would add value, that would do something that was part of what really passionately interested me, but at the same time would create a business that generated revenues for me even when I didn't actually work. And actually, the crux of this came about in 2011, because as you probably know, Mark, in 2011, I nearly died of cancer. And I was in hospital for 3 months. I was out of work for 9 months. But the great thing was, even though I wasn't actually working, the business was already still functioning. And so I was still generating a revenue while I was ill and in a sick bed. So that was really, really important, that I've actually managed to create this something which works for me even when I'm not working.
Yes, and that is quite profound, some of that stuff, but it's worth remembering those things. I can remember one of the books you've written, it actually mentions your mission. That's obviously not surprisingly, That's all about motivation, if you want to share that with the listeners.
Yeah, well, my mission really is a sort of 3-part mission, which is really about, I realized that it came to me that the purpose of my life was to motivate people. But when you break that down, it's I need to motivate myself first and foremost, because unless I'm highly motivated, then I can't motivate other people. Energy is contagious. Energy is infectious. Nobody goes up and fights a war when the general says, "Oh, go over the trenches and, attack the enemy." It's boring. You've got to have it. Let's get them, lads. Let's get them, lasses. Let's do it. And that energy, that power, then suddenly, yeah, let's do it then. Let's do it. And so everyone gets it. So the first thing about motivating is self-motivation. The second thing about motivation is, well, I need to motivate my nearest and dearest and the people around me, the teams, the people I work with. And so all that proximity stuff that's around me needs to be motivated. But I think to achieve greatness, you have to widen it to the third point where you're saying, well, really, I need to motivate the world. Now, I don't mean that in the literal sense, I need to construct something that's going to motivate the world. What I mean is that the influence of what you're doing on the individual, and if you want to call it the family team level, spreads out. And so you become an influence in your society, in your community, for actually being motivational, having and generating energy so that in fact other people are enabled thereby to achieve their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations.
Right. Yep. And I can't let you go on any further before we mention motivational speakers. Have you got anything to say about motivational speakers?
Well, yeah. I mean, I regularly get confused for one. I get people think I'm a motivational speaker, and actually once, and this is where I get this little story from. Really, once somebody said to me, I won't mention who, but somebody said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm involved in motivation." So, oh, rah then. So rah-rah, I was a rah-rah person, which is like, I think he meant a very fluffy person with no substance whatsoever, but somehow jumps up and down, walks on fire, jumps out of helicopters, climbs mountains. And if I just simply do enough of that, I would actually be a motivational speaker. And there is good in that, and it's a good thing in itself, and I'm not knocking it per se. But what I like to say about Motivational Maps is we have a science as well. And it's not just about, most of this rah-rah speaking really leads to 2 weeks of energy, and then people go back to work, and then slowly but surely, within 2 weeks, all that energy from that motivational speaker dissipates, and we're back to normal because nothing has changed in the organization. So what we're trying to do, what I say is, I'm not a motivational speaker, I'm a motivational expert. And being a motivational expert, I'm going to provide the expertise for you within your own team, within your own organization or company, to be able to embed motivation because you understand how it works. We've got the language and the metrics to enable you to make motivation work for you.
That's sums it up very nicely. And also, I was going to mention, because it crops up a lot in conversations that I have, And it's no secret that I use motivational maps in my business. But I get asked about the difference between motivation and inspiration. Have you got a view on that?
Well, I do have a view on it. But first thing I have to say, Mark Terrell, you are a very perspicacious person, wise beyond your years. The fact that you use motivational maps in your practice shows that you are going to the very top of your profession. So let me just congratulate you on that. But on the actual question itself, yes, there is a distinction to be made between motivation and inspiration. And in a way, I genuinely believe that motivation is something that can be taught and learned, whereas inspiration is much more intangible. But the essence of the difference is this. Motivation is actually something that you're experiencing now in the present, and it's either being satisfied or it's not being satisfied. So you know from motivational maps, we have 9 motivators, and either you are feeling secure or you're not. And if you're not feeling secure, you want more security, or you're feeling an expert or you're not. And so you'll want more training and learning. So in other words, what I'm saying is motivation in one very real sense has what I call a present tense orientation. It's about the now. Inspiration, on the other hand, actually has a future tense perspective, because what inspiration does, it appeals to your imagination as to what you might be. So in one sense, motivation is fueling your self-image, but the inspiration is fueling your ideal self. So imagination, of course, is one of the, there are 3 tools for personal change, 3 tools ultimately that actually transform us into the people that we can become. And they are, 1, desire. So that actually is essentially motivation. Our motivations for things, for states, for qualities, for characteristics, our motivation for them are our desires. So our desires draw us forward. So desires, whatever they say in certain philosophies, are really important. We need to understand what they are, and we need to cultivate them. The second thing that draws us forward is actually our imagination. Now, our imagination, as the word says itself, is imagine, image. It's this creation of pictures in the mind that actually may not currently exist. They may not be part of it, but there is a future state that we want to be in. And that is what inspiration does. And we need to bear in mind the origin of the word inspiration is inspire as opposed to expire, where we breathe out. So a breathing in, an inspiration is a breathing in of the spirit which fuels the imagination. And the third thing, which I haven't mentioned, but I'll mention as a personal tool of development, which is so powerful, are our expectations. And our expectations are our beliefs about future outcomes. So in other words, if I believe that having a chat with you on a podcast was a complete waste of time, then that would actually demotivate me to want to actually have this podcast experience. But my expectation is it'll be great fun. I'm going to really enjoy myself. It'll be beneficial for my business, beneficial for your business, and actually we'll get a good result. And actually, because I have that belief system, it's highly likely that that will materialize in the real world somewhere down the line. So these 3 tools, desires, expectations, and imagination, as you can see, are linked to motivation and imagination. And the distinction is really what I'd call a present and future tense orientation.
Right. Excellent. And very comprehensively described there. So just moving on then to a bit more about what you do and what your role is. And I note that your title within Motivational Maps as a business is now Creative Director.
Yes.
When you say creative, tell us what that entails.
Well, it entails 2 things, a positive and a negative. The negative is that it would be a fatal mistake for me to be the managing director. And so we had a consultant in some years back, you may know him actually, but we had a consultant in some years back who said, Linda, my wife, must be the managing director. We need somebody to curb me, to stop me, to actually, just actually put a brake on what it is I may or may not do at any given point. And it's worked wonderfully. It's one of the best decisions we made. So I could not be the managing director because I am too over the top. So actually, Linda is brilliant as a managing director. She actually has got a view of the future, a view of what we're doing, and she stops me from over reacting to things. So that's great. The positive side of calling myself the creative director is that actually probably the primary thing that I do within Motivational Maps now, since I've stopped training and coaching myself directly, so in order to focus on the business, is what I would call product development. So the creation of products and ideas that actually enrich the business for the benefit of the whole community, that is what primarily I actually am responsible for. So you need to bear in mind with Motivational Maps, we currently have at least, I'm not even counting books and manuals and all the other stuff, right, as part of the package, but we've got at least 5 online products. Mm-hmm. We have the Motivational Maps, the mother product. From that, we've got the youth map. We've got the team map, we've got the organizational map, and through Motivational Leadership and Kate Turner, we've also got an e-learning package. Mm-hmm. So we've actually got 5 absolutely quite distinctive tools, and we will have more in due course. There's more to come. So, developing products is very, very important. And so that is why I'm called the creative director of Motivational Maps, as well as the fact I happen to like the word creative. And as a matter of fact, I happen to have creator as my number one motivator. So, the whole universe is aligned with my destiny. It's your destiny, Luke.
So that's a perfect lead on to actually, I was going to ask you about Linda, if she's the managing director. So what is the difference between her motivations and your motivations, which makes her a good manager or maybe leader? I don't know what we describe her.
It's very difficult to describe your wife in public, isn't it? I mean, any man who does that is really taking a huge risk. If I was just to give you one little insight based on one little fact about Motivational Maps, would that suffice you and you won't press me any further?
That would be just what I'm asking for, no more than that.
Okay. One little fact about, and don't tell anyone, please, it's just between you and me, Mark. One little fact about Linda Sale, my wife, is that the builder is in her top 3. Okay, say no more.
Perfect. That's
it's not in my top.
I think we shouldn't assume everybody that's listening to this knows what a builder is. So could you just give a?
Well, I'll let you. You're a business practitioner. Tell them what a builder motivator is, Mark.
Okay, so a builder motivation is someone that is motivated by material things and money. So yes. It's something that with my work using Motivational Maps and business people, it's quite often well down the list and sometimes might even be their lowest motivator. And then they wonder why they're not making money.
Exactly.
And it's because they're not motivated by money. And interestingly, I had a conversation with my daughter today. She's actually just got a new job.
She's a lovely person. Lovely person.
And she, first thing she said was, Motivational Maps. She said, they're the only thing that I've ever done that I've really, really got something out of and understood straight away, which obviously is great feedback for you. But also what I said to her at the time was that she was telling me about the negotiations that she was having with her new employer about her salary and her bonus and all the other things that was part of the package. And I said, look, I've got to take my hat off to you because I would not be as good at negotiating that package as you were. And she said, well, why is that? And I said, because, well, you should know that because you know what motivates me. And I said, you know what motivates you. I said, you know that what motivates you, one of the top 3 is builder. And it's builder is not in my top 3. And that's the difference. She said, yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's a brilliant observation. It's a brilliant observation, Mark. And the thing to tell the listeners as well, of course, is that, even when we know Motivational Maps, it's still so easy to imagine people are like us. We keep thinking people are like us, but they're not like us. And the Motivational Maps exactly pinpoint what that difference is. And that's exactly it. Exactly it.
Yeah. So it was a great example today.
A great example.
I think it'd be worth mentioning, actually, why you called them Motivational Maps as opposed to motivational something else.
Yeah, well, again, you see, originally they were called the wine list. This was my idea. Wine list, and this came about through how the maps were actually originated with the models. And you'll know that one of the things that I studied to look at in order to create my model was Edgar Schein's career anchors. And I can't remember exactly what was in it now, but there was something about work, the inner experience of work or something like that. And so from this, I picked up what I thought was a catchy acronym called the Wine List. And so the original title of Motivational Maps was the Wine List. And wine, in capital letters, stood for work inner needs experience or something like that. Work inner needs experience. And I thought this was really catchy. It was absolutely dreadful. And it was like one of those, I'm not a marketeer. And so clearly that showed I wasn't a marketeer. And so it began to dawn on me that nobody could make sense of it either. What I thought was, they'd all want to do the wine list because it sounded so, like they were having a sort of Valentine's night with, James Sale with the wine list, like the chocolate list. And we got this negative feedback from it. And I was sitting there talking to she who must be obeyed, my wife, at the MD of the company one day. And she said, well, what is it you're doing? And I said, well, yes, these motivations. We're measuring motivation. We're measuring motivation. Well, motivational maps then, she said. She just came out with it. Motivational maps. And as soon as she said it, I thought, Jesus.
I never realised that. I never realised that Linda was the
No, Linda came up with the name. I mean, she comes up with lots of things, actually. She doesn't get enough credit for what she does, but she actually comes up with so much stuff. I mean, she truly is an equal partner in this. I mean, I have created the maps, but there's so much around this, with the admin system and everything else. Linda's brilliant. So she came up with the name. Yes,
and I'm guessing she must have creator up there in her top three because I think she does some fabulous work with the books. We haven't mentioned. Well, you did mention that you write books, and obviously it would be remiss not to mention the books because we've already had two of your co-authors on this podcast already.
Marvelous!
And Steve.
Oh, marvelous!
So she designs the covers of your books
and does all the figure drawings. It's like all the illustrations within are also by Linda. Yes, so she's actually very integrally involved with the production of the books with me. So we do what's it called? The index at the end of the book. All that, which is very time consuming work. We do that together. We work that out together. So she's very involved.
Yeah, and obviously without going too much detail, she's an artist in her own right, isn't she?
She's an artist in her own right, very successful artist, and she's fabulous.
Look up Linda Sale, and you might come across something that you might like to buy because there's some lovely stuff I've seen.
Linda E. Sale. That's the artist. Okay. Yeah, Linda E. The E in the middle makes all the difference.
Don't forget the E.
Don't forget the E. Linda E. Sale.
Okay. Right, so I think it's about time we probably looked back to my first experience because you mentioned the wine list and it wasn't so long ago actually. You emailed me to say, I found this, you might be interested, and it was my wine list, wasn't it?
Yes, it was indeed, yes. When you clear out the old junk and you find the name Mark Terrell, you think, oh, scrap that, and then you look at it, oh my goodness me.
So the reason why it'll be worth visiting is that I did that wine list, and the reason why, one of the reasons why I use motivational maps, apart from the fact obviously they're so useful and they are they're second to none when it comes to helping people make decisions, is that. I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh, God.
Well, you wanted to go back to the beginning.
Yes. The thing is, exactly. Thank you. Put me back on track there. The thing is that I didn't pay enough attention to what it was telling me at the time. And that's what I always am mindful of when I'm using the information myself and with my clients. I make sure that they understand what it's telling them. So in other words, what my wine list was telling me back in the day was that the thing that least motivated me is managing people. My director motivator was the thing that least motivated me. So the thing that I get out of bed to do, it wasn't to actually lead and manage a team. But unfortunately, in the latter days of my retail business, what was I doing? Spending most of my time doing something that didn't motivate me.
Yes.
And also, I was not doing enough or hardly any of the things that did motivate me.
Yes.
And so it was a double whammy.
Yes.
And I come across that so many times where people are doing things, too much of what doesn't motivate them and not enough of what does motivate them. So it's almost, like like I say, a
downward
double
spiral, a downward spiral. The thing is, Mark, you mustn't beat yourself up, because in fact, I could take some blame myself here. I mean, I am absolutely convinced I told you this information and I advised you. However, you need to bear in mind, we all need to bear in mind, that when I did so, the tool was relatively new. Mm-hmm. I was testing it out on people, and the kind of certainty that we now have about this, having done 50,000 maps, wasn't there at the beginning. Neither, if you think about it, was the actual quality of the output. I mean, the original versions of the map were good, but they didn't look spectacular, and they didn't have that kind of, they weren't ISO approved. They didn't have these books behind them. And, so in a way, part of influencing people is to do with the authority that you have, the credibility and the authority that you have. Mm-hmm. You have to be credible and you have to have authority. And it's not that we as coaches or consultants need to go up and start sort of like laying down the law with people, but I think there are subtle signals we can give whereby we could make what we're saying more telling, more effective, more powerful for people than perhaps I made for you back then, 15 or more years ago, when it was very early days with that. I've always been a confident person, so I'm not pretending I was some wallflower at the back then, but it was a new product. It was being tested out. You were one of those people I was testing it on, and I don't think maybe I was emphatic enough about the implications for you. Also, too, you need to bear in mind the other thing. You were in a family business. You had a family yourself to think about. You were in a cash generative business, and it's actually very difficult for anybody when they're in the middle of a war zone to start thinking about what it would be like outside the war zone. You weren't just, it wasn't that you were just surviving, you were making a good living, but actual fact, the problems of running a retail thing were just 24/7. You didn't have time to think about it. So you wanted the easy win. So I was advising you were taking some easy win situations, were very useful, but the root problem wasn't being addressed. So what you were doing the symptoms, but we weren't doing the causal stuff, which is a classic thing that happens in the medical profession. They give you a symptomatic drug that covers, you get rid of the headache, but what's causing the headache is not being got rid of. So I think we can excuse ourselves a little bit. We were young then. We were young. We didn't know what the hell we were doing.
It's good to know. It's good to know 15 years later, though. At the time, I was a guinea pig, but
yeah, and I charged you full whack for it. So you're going to get credit for that.
Yes, I'll have a word with my lawyers about that and see.
Yeah. You'll have a job, mate. I've spent it. There's nothing left.
Okay, I think we should obviously bring this into context with leaders as such. We mentioned my leadership experience with in my family retail business and all that. And I think, and also you mentioned earlier about the two-pronged, it's about motivating ourselves firstly, and then motivating our team, a bit like the scenario with, when they tell you when you're on an airplane, make sure you put your mask on yourself first before you help everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
So it's important that if you're in a leadership position, if you want to motivate your team, the first thing you've got to do is make sure that you're motivated. Is that true to say?
I would say that's absolutely true. You have to actually address the motivational issues for yourself. And in fact, in a bizarre way, it's not just being motivated and the effect that that has on everybody around you. It's how can you possibly expect people to want to assess themselves if you've never assessed yourself and you don't even know how that process might work for you? I mean, in fact, there's a whole issue of competence there. The expertise of doing this, you have to go through that process. And in fact, there is a third point, which is that, if you don't go through that process, where's the humility? It's like, I know best. I'm okay. I'm okay, Jack. It's everyone else who's got a problem. It's the kind of mindset guaranteed to lead you into problems in the long term.
Mm. So once we sort ourselves out and we know that we are motivated and we're doing as much as we can of the things that motivate us, we've then got to think about the team that we lead. How do we... Obviously, Motivational Maps is going to help with that. But what you've been obviously a trainer before Motivational Maps. So in your experience, what would you say to someone that's maybe new to a leadership position and how to motivate them, their team?
Well, I'm actually currently, as you know, writing a book, a fourth book, in fact, on mapping motivation. This one's actually called Mapping Motivation for Leadership. And in the last 2 or so years, there has been an exciting new development in the application of motivational maps. So, I mean, I could just talk about the team map, but actually probably Steve Jones has talked about that. Bevis may have talked about that. And, a lot of people are talking about how to use the team map. So rather than repeat that information, I would like to introduce perhaps your listeners to something new and exciting about how to use motivational maps. And what's been discovered, and it was discovered by one of our top motivational maps practitioners called Mark Turner, who actually heads up our youth map, but he discovered this through his own ingenuity, basically. But really, it's what we call motivational 360-degree appraisal. And what this involves is that it's using the team map facility on the system, but instead of actually just getting your team members to complete their team map and then comparing how everyone's motivators look as a team, which is invaluable, is incredibly useful. What we ask them to do, and what this book has got a couple of chapters about, is actually, take a look at your leader and think about their behaviors and what they do. And based upon your observations of their behavior, complete a motivational map as if you were your leader. And so what we end up with is, say, for example, say there are 7 people in the team, six people plus the leader, 7. 6 people then think about what they think their leader is in terms of how their behaviors impact them, and you get a map. And my goodness me, Mark, the revelations, the complete, you just can't believe it. I mean, if you think that the leader doesn't understand their own motivators and can't understand their team's motivational profiles, wait till you get a dose of them thinking about their leader. We had one of these, and actually this one was in I get mixed up which book switch, but I think it was in the engagement book, where really it was done from the perspective of the team member rather than the leader. So this is from the perspective of the leader now, but from the perspective of the team member, their own leader had absolutely no idea of what was motivating them. And yet, we know, I mean, I actually make this assertion in the book, when we actually break down what leadership involves, at least 50% of leadership is about motivation. It's that tightly correlated. And yet, when you look at all the literature on leadership, most of it only pays lip service to motivation. And usually it doesn't go much further than Maslow and Hertzberg and those old models. They're not saying they're bad models, but those old models which are trotted out time and time again. Because there's no language, because there's no metric, people kind of swan over it and they get on with the stuff they're comfortable. So leaders need to have a vision. So they do a vision planning exercise and they'll do something else. But actually, even building teams is about leadership. So leaders need to motivate individuals on an individual basis. They need to motivate the teams. And then there are various other things they do where actually the motivation factor, for example, the number one thing some people argue that a leader does of all the activities that they do, and there is a logic in saying this, is recruitment. Because, of course, if you recruit the wrong people, you have a motivational issue right at the very beginning. So you recruit people. But do you, when you do the recruitment process, take on board actually the motivation of this person? Have they got real motivation? Or is it a false motivation? Because everybody at interview appears motivated. They turn up, they put on a show. Everyone's motivated. They have CVs that appear motivated and motivational, but actually you don't want demotivated people. I had a real case example once with an insurance company. This is absolutely true. I was working with them for 4 years. And they had motivational maps embedded in their culture until they were bought out by a much bigger national corporate. And then new leadership came in and, it's a changing of the guard. They're their people. So it ended. Although it had been fabulously successful, you could even argue that part of the fact that they got bought out was because they were so successful and they had their people stuff sorted. But I had a situation once where I went away for a month's holiday in the summer, and they had access to using the maps internally. They were trained internally to use the maps. And I came back, and I hadn't been following it when I was on holiday. And I looked at, they'd appointed 3 new people in my absence. As, how dare they, without my permission, but they'd appointed 3 new people. And I looked at one of the maps, and the other 2 were fine. But I said, Jesus, I thought, they just appointed a guy who's 28% motivated. So I phoned up the CEO and I said, I've just looked at this stuff you've passed on to me. And you've appointed this guy, I can't remember his name now, but let's call him Darren. You've got Darren, and Darren is 28% motivated. Oh, yes. Yes, I know about that. I said, but why have you appointed somebody who's 28% motivated? Oh, he's in a terrible job at the moment. It's very demotivating for us. So we understood that. And of course, that's why he wants to be with us. I said, no, you don't understand. He said something I hadn't made clear to him. You don't understand. I said, don't understand what? I said, he's 28% motivated in the job he's in now. In 6 months, he's going to be 28% motivated in your job. He's allowed himself to become demotivated to that level before he's taken action on it. And do you know what? Within a year, they had to dismiss him, which could have been prevented by a more interrogative way of asking questions that got to the underlying motivation. Here was somebody that took jobs on, was all excited to begin with, but very quickly got bored and then got demotivated. And then it was the problem of the company. So, this whole thing about recruitment and motivation is vitally important. So the leader is somebody who needs to take a really proactive stance. If they don't do it themselves, and having a system in place where something like the MAP system is there so that they can establish, am I employing somebody who is genuinely motivated, or am I employing somebody who appears at interview to be motivated?
Yes. And I've just had an interesting conversation with one of my practitioners that I trained about, because he was working with, he's a recruiter, and he's mapped the existing team, and they are looking to bring somebody in as another director. And they, funny enough, we talk about Builder again. None of them had Builder in their top 3, and they wondered why then the business wasn't really growing and making money.
Yes.
So we obviously had the conversation about, well, obviously that new person that comes in has to have more of a Builder drive in them. But obviously be aware that obviously not only that is if they come in with that motivation, it's obviously going to be maybe in conflict with the existing
exactly
culture. Yeah,
exactly.
So there's 2 things to think about there. Bring the right person in to get what you want, but actually be aware that person might not be the person. That person might not be like you, but actually you just have to embrace why they're not like you, because the party is what you need.
Well, the thing about it is that I think 2 things here. Firstly, it's actually motivational diversity. Motivational diversity is actually potentially a really good thing. But to actually embrace motivational diversity, you need to understand the kind of person who's going to be motivationally diverse to you is going to really annoy you. Very high probability. The key thing is whether the values are going to be the same. So underneath the motivators, what are the values? If the values align, and this is a high self-esteem person, it doesn't matter how much they annoy you, they're worth having. Mm-hmm. But if they don't align, then the motivational conflict is going to be fatal.
Right. We could talk about this all day, but I'm conscious of time. And
you move on, man.
I know I've only got an hour of your time maximum, so we've got to think about wrapping up at some point in the next few minutes. So
I make a lovely Christmas gift.
Do you?
Yeah, if you want to wrap me up, I'm wonderful.
So in view of sort of wrapping things up, what I tend to ask the podcast interviewees, guests, is could you leave our listeners with maybe 3 top tips around, in your case, motivation that they can take forward in their leadership role?
Yes, I could do that. Absolutely. So what would I say? So what 3 things do I think are absolutely mission critical for a business? Now, obviously, I think what I'm about to say would apply to a corporate too, actually, but I'm really thinking about SMEs. I'm thinking about the kind of businesses I'm involved with, I've run myself, and the kind of people, the entrepreneurial kind of people like myself and like yourself, who get things done. So number 1 thing, which will come as no surprise based on what I've already said, would be to innovate by productizing services wherever possible. So what that means is that we need to keep on productizing and creating products, and particularly when you have services, how we can actually productize them as well as being a service, which means really, can I make things cheaper, faster, better? So the better is obviously the quality issue. So can I make things of a higher quality than what currently exists? I mean, it's no accident, for example, that Motivational Maps, I think when we position the pricing of it in the market, it's significantly lower than most, if not all, psychometric tools that I'm aware of. It's actually, it's cheaper. It's immediate because it's online. When we think the quality is better. So, we're trying to create more stuff on the back of it. And that also means, and it's allied with the idea of innovation, is that what we're trying to do as a business, and we should keep in the forefront of our minds all the time, is to develop multiple income streams from these product developments. So you need to remember always, you're not a real business till you're making money when you sleep. So that drives me. It drives me because I don't believe in pensions much. I haven't got much of a pension anyway. And, really, I don't really want to sort of give up being creative. So, I want to drive on and actually create lots of multiple income streams for the business. And I think anyone in business should be doing that without going outside their core competence. So it's not about having just lots of ideas from different people that don't fit together. It's actually creating it from the core of what you start with. And what you start with then grows and grows and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's what I'm talking about. The second thing I would say, and I've had so much experience with this, I can't begin to describe it. The best way of saying it would be to sell, and sell again. And, the other side of it, what I'm trying to get at, I'm saying the heads is sell. The tails is don't get drawn into overarching, large and expensive marketing projects which suck money out of your business, but whose return on investment is highly speculative. I mean, a number of people have tried to get me, and, some have got me to move a little bit on this into, if you just do this, you just do SEO, you just do this, you just do that, you just do something or other, and this marketing is going to automatically generate revenues for you. I've always found that the kind of people that keep advocating marketing stuff can't sell for toffees. Really, they can't sell for toffees. They're just used to selling, and selling is so important. So we in Motivational Maps prefer lots of small sales rather than gambling on one big one. We know various businesses where they've had one big client and then they go out of business when they lose it. It's like, to us, that kind of marketing is like trying to hit the jackpot. So it's rather like gambling for us, and we don't like it. So small fish are very sweet. So having lots of clients from lots of different angles helps future-proof your business. So, for example, with us, we have corporates, we have SMEs, we have coaches, consultants, and trainers. We're in the UK, we're in 13 other countries. And so what we're trying to do, we've got sort of youngish middle-aged people, we've got quite older people, we've got different ethnic races, we've got a great range of men and women, So in fact, it's really a very diverse, nearly 500 of these kind of, nearly 500 clients, basically. So we'd like to think we're not going to go out of business because suddenly somebody gets stroppy with us or dumps us. Mm-hmm. We're just going to carry on because we've made it quite strong by selling, and selling again.
Yep. Okay.
So, and the third thing, I would say from bitter experience, and it's probably summed up best by Warren Buffett, but, basically only work with good people because, as Buffett observed, you can't get a good deal with a bad person. So whether we're talking about employees, suppliers, or clients or customers, when you get started, sometimes you can't afford to be too cheesy. You just got to get off the ground. You've got to, but the more success you get, I think the more choosy you should be about who you spend time with. So here we get to the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And this principle seems to contradict point number 2, because at point number 2, I'm saying sell to anybody, sort of. But I don't think it's totally incompatible. So I think, small fish are sweet, and often you can make small sales and there's no big investment of your time or commitment of effort for you. You can just do it. But when you get to a certain volume of sales, you very quickly can see that, who the good people are. People with values, with ethics, who are honest, consistent, who do what they say they're going to do, who don't mess you around, whether they're suppliers or they're clients or employees for that matter. Those are the people that you actually need to cultivate, to spend time with, to do things for. And if you identify who the really valuable people are and you add real value to them and their lives, you could absolute guarantee, as sure as eggs are eggs, and you can guarantee they will reciprocate for you. Yeah. So Motivational Maps is very fortunate in that we have got some absolutely stonkingly wonderful people in our system. And, in the past, I have personally made some mistakes. I have misestimated people. Even despite the map itself, you still can make mistakes. People talk the talk. People say this, people say that. Mm-hmm. But by and large, we have got some great people. And these great people are going to make the Motivational Maps business much greater than I could possibly make it on my own. So it's very much, and I'm hoping these people too are going to realize their dreams, not me frog marching them, not me franchising them, not me giving them a system they have to follow, but realizing their potential through this particular product and the way we do business.
Yeah. I'm going to back up what you've just said, because the people that I meet, all that are practitioners, are great people, and they're in it for the right reasons, and that comes across. And the exciting thing about Motivational Maps is that there is so many different uses for them. And people, because the way you set things up, people have license to sort of create ways of using the maps. So they're creating at the same time as you. So
exactly. They're exactly that. You're releasing their creativity. You're empowering people. Yes. Then, of course, the thing goes ballistic, which is what's happening with it.
And we know, obviously, one of the things that we tend to want later on in our careers when we're doing something that we want to do tends to be that creative thing that rises to the top. And obviously, if we can fulfill that, then it's all good for us and obviously our clients.
Yeah, and actually, here's a benefit. Just to add one thing to that, but the reason for doing it, we come on to what is now become a cliche, is do what you love. But it's a true cliche. But the thing is, one really overwhelmingly powerful reason for doing that, it's not just because it makes you feel better about yourself. Actually, it's for longevity's sake. Mm-hmm. All the businesses that really last really have this kind of overarching, people love it, and their successors love it, and it carries on because there's a love for what they're doing. Mm. It's not a get rich quick. Somebody once said, and it's a very profound thing, the purpose of life is not to breathe air. Okay, we have to breathe air. The purpose of a business is not to make money. We have to make money. The purpose of a business is much higher than that. The purpose of your life is not to breathe air, although you must breathe air, otherwise you won't have a life. But the purpose is fundamentally different. So when you get to that higher purpose, of course, you're actually in a magical area.
Mm-hmm. And I can't think of a better place to finish this interview than that. I think that's a great way to leave our listeners thinking about what is their purpose, why do they do what they do, and make sure that that's at front of mind when you're making decisions, whether it's for a business or whether you're planning your career. Make sure that what it is that motivates you and that your purpose, more importantly, is always being fulfilled at some point.
Well, thank you, Mark, for inviting me. I really appreciate you inviting me.
I was just about to say the same, James. Thank you for your time. I know you're very, very busy, and I am very grateful for you coming on today. And hopefully we will have another talk at some point in the future. But for now, I'll say goodbye.
Great speaking to you, and I look forward to following your success with great interest.
Thank you for listening today. As action leads to outcomes, make sure you make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe at thereluctantleader.co.uk, where you'll find links to all the past episodes, vlogs, blogs, and how you can get in touch with me. Until next time, bye for now.